Something has just happened in the silent darkness of deep space that should not be possible. Something so violently contradictory to every model, every prediction, and every law of orbital mechanics that scientists monitoring 3I Atlas are no longer speaking calmly, no longer debating, no longer reassuring one another that anomalies can be explained, because just hours ago, the interstellar megastructure that has dominated global attention for months, the ancient, accelerating, impossible object older than our sun, vanished, not slowly, not subtly, but in a sudden instantaneous disappearance that defies every known physical process, leaving behind no debris, no trajectory, no gravitational wake, no thermal residue, absolutely nothing. And if you want to follow every horrifying development in the unraveling mystery of 3I Atlas, smash that like button right now so the algorithm knows you're watching. Because what I'm about to reveal is the most terrifying twist yet, one that has left NASA, ESA, CNSA, and every major observatory across the globe in a state of paralyzed shock. Because this was not a failure of sensors, not a glitch, not a calibration error. Dozens of independent instruments across Earth, in orbit, and on deep space probes all recorded the same impossible event at the exact same millisecond. 3I's, Atlas did not drift away, did not accelerate out of range, did not explode or fragment or decay into dust. It ceased as though it was never there at all, as though the fabric of space around it collapsed or folded or shifted in a way that no natural force can replicate. And let me be absolutely clear about why this should terrify you, because objects with confirmed mass, velocity, and gravitational influence do not simply blink out of existence, yet that is exactly what happened. And the panic inside the highest levels of the scientific community is rising not because of what vanished, but because of what we now realize we might have missed. Because the disappearance was preceded by a sequence of micro-events so subtle, so rapid, and so profoundly unnatural that the analysts reviewing the final seconds of telemetry are saying openly, privately, and fearfully that 3I Atlas did not leave our universe in any way we currently understand. It transitioned, and what that means, what it implies, is more terrifying than the disappearance itself. Because when analysts slowed the final telemetry frame by frame, stretched every frequency band, enhanced every photon, every magnetic fluctuation, every gravitational ripple, they discovered something chilling hidden in the last 4 milliseconds. Before 3I Atlas vanished, the object began to distort, not physically, not through rotation or acceleration, but through space-time itself, as though its outline were folding inward, collapsing into a geometry that does not exist in three-dimensional physics, and the distortion wasn't random. It followed a precise, repeating pattern, a recursive collapse sequence that resembles the theoretical signatures predicted for exotic space-time curvature, the kind that only appear in equations dealing with wormholes, higher dimensional transitions, or engineered gravitational manipulation, none of which should exist outside of speculative physics. Yet here they were, unfolding in real data across multiple observatories, and the horror deepened even further when gravitational sensors detected a tiny pulse, a single, clean, perfect gravitational spike so sharp and so artificial that every astrophysicist who saw the plot initially assumed their equipment had been tampered with, because natural gravitational waves do not appear in symmetrical, instantaneous pulses, nor do they occur from objects with mass as small as 3I Atlas. Such a pulse would require mechanisms or technologies far beyond anything humanity has ever conceived of, and this pulse occurred at the exact moment the object disappeared, meaning that its vanishing was not a drift, not an escape, not even an implosion, but an activation, the final step in a sequence we were watching for months without understanding. And that realization has triggered a clandestine frenzy across every space agency on Earth, as scientists now sift through the final seconds of data looking for anything at all, that could explain what we missed, because only now do they understand that the signs were there all along. The micro-oscillations in its mass distribution, the harmonic distortions in its magnetic field, the unnatural tightening of its rotational axis, the brief flickers of radiation that matched no known decay chain, the increasing synchronization of interior structures detected through radar tomography. All of these were not anomalies, not glitches, not artifacts, but steps, stages, phases in an activation cycle billions of years old. And the terrifying question, echoing now through private research channels, is simple. If 3I Atlas didn't disappear but transitioned, then transitioned to where? And worse, why now? Why, at the precise moment humanity had hundreds of instruments pointed directly at it? Why, after releasing its final fragment into our solar system? Why, after adjusting its orbit into perfect alignment with our observational window? Why, after completing the countdown sequence hiding in its internal oscillations? Why, after emitting those strange, structured pulses that no one has decoded yet? Pulses that now appear to align perfectly with the collapsing geometric pattern recorded in its last image. And as specialists map the sequence backward, it is becoming increasingly clear that 3i Atlas wasn't trying to escape detection. It was preparing for us to see its final act, as though our observation was required, as though it needed to be witnessed, as though the completion of the sequence depended on being observed. A concept that leaves even the most rational physicists trembling because it suggests intention, design, purpose. And if that is true, then what purpose did its disappearance serve, and what exactly have we triggered simply by watching? Because the deeper analysts dig into the final telemetry, the clearer it becomes that the disappearance of 3i Atlas was not an end. It was a transition, a change in state, the culmination of a sequence that had been building quietly, steadily, methodically, since the object first entered our solar system. And now that scientists are reviewing the older data with the knowledge of what came next, they are realizing with mounting dread that 3i Atlas had been signaling this moment for months, but humanity failed to recognize the warnings, the patterns, the countdown buried in the noise of its shifting magnetic field, the resonance pulses in its thermal emissions, the strange harmonics detected in its reflectivity curves, all of which now appear to form a single escalating pattern, a rising sequence of activation markers, each one more pronounced than the last, each one designed to prime whatever mechanism existed within the megastructure for the final step. And that final step, the one we watched without understanding, was a transition so controlled, so precise, so unimaginably advanced that it has shattered the confidence of every astrophysicist involved. Because natural objects do not vanish without trace. Natural objects do not collapse into higher dimensional geometries. Natural objects do not emit gravitational pulses that mimic engineered space-time manipulation. Yet this one did. And the terror grows exponentially when you realize that the disappearance was not instantaneous in the way our eyes perceived it. In the microseconds leading up to the event, the object's apparent mass dropped in perfect, mathematically smooth increments, as though it were being unwoven from our reality one layer at a time, and these increments correspond exactly, horrifyingly, with the harmonic intervals in the object's final electromagnetic signal, which means the collapse wasn't random, wasn't chaotic, but synchronized with the signal it broadcast, as though the disappearance and the message were two components of the same operation. And when cryptographers attempted to interpret the harmonics, they found something so unsettling that the preliminary report was immediately classified. The harmonic pattern does not resemble language, nor mathematics, nor encryption, but instruction, a sequence of ordered commands unfolding in nested layers. And the final layer, the one transmitted at the precise moment of disappearance, is shorter, sharper, denser than all the others, like a trigger signal, a final command in a system waiting billions of years to execute its last line of code. And this has led to the most terrifying question yet. If 3i Atlas executed a final command, then what did it activate? What did it trigger? What did it call? And why did it require disappearing to do it? Because immediately after the gravitational pulse, multiple deep space observatories detected something even more chilling. A faint, momentary distortion far from the object's last position, a ripple of space-time so small it would have been dismissed as noise if not for two facts. It occurred exactly 0.43 seconds after the collapse, and it occurred in a region of space where nothing should be happening, a point with no known objects, no dust clouds, no gravitational influences. Yet the distortion registered all the same, and when triangulated it forms the first coordinate in a pattern. Scientists now fear might be a path, a route, a chain of space-time echoes marking the trajectory of something moving, not through space as we understand it, but through a medium we cannot perceive. And the worst part is that 5 additional distortions have appeared since then, each one fainter than the last, each one forming a perfectly symmetrical arc behind the first, like the footsteps of something massive and unseen, something following the path of 3i Atlas into a place we cannot observe. And now the analysts are no longer asking what happened to the object. They are asking what followed it, what responded to the signal, what the disappearance summoned, and what is now moving silently in a realm beyond our senses. Because if these space-time footprints continue forming, they will intersect a point perilously close to our solar system, and no one knows what will emerge when something older than stars finishes its impossible journey toward us. Because, as these faint, terrifying space-time echoes continue to appear one after another, forming a trail of distortions, extending like footprints across the fabric of reality itself, scientists are realizing with suffocating dread that the disappearance of 3i Atlas was not an escape, but a handoff. The moment a new phase began, the moment something else took its place, something massive, coordinated, and incomprehensibly distant in origin. And the more observatories around the world compare data, the more nightmarish the pattern becomes, because each distortion pulse arrives slightly closer to the solar system, maintaining a perfect geometric spacing that suggests not random emergence, but movement, steady, deliberate, and incredibly fast. And when analysts calculate the velocity implied by these distortions, the number is so extreme that it has left entire teams speechless. Whatever is generating them is traveling faster than any object has ever been observed moving, not just through space, but possibly through space-time itself, bypassing the limitations of velocity, inertia, and gravitational drag, as though they are irrelevant. And this realization has triggered the most urgent set of interagency communications in human history, because if something capable of manipulating space-time with this level of precision is approaching, then humanity is no longer observing a phenomenon. We are being approached by one, and the fear becomes exponentially greater when data scientists overlay the timing of the echoes with the final harmonic sequence transmitted by 3i Atlas, because the echoes align with the intervals of the final transmission, like steps in a dance, like the following of a coded path, like the execution of a predetermined route, meaning the disappearance signal was not random noise. It was a summons, and something answered it, something that is now moving in a straight, unbroken line toward the coordinates where 3i Atlas vanished. And that line, according to the latest projections, will intersect the outer solar system in less than a week. The implications of this discovery are so catastrophic that governments have begun quietly preparing emergency communication protocols, because the pattern of echoes suggests scale, immense scale, far larger than 3i Atlas, possibly orders of magnitude larger, as though the megastructure we studied for months was not the entity itself, but merely a signal buoy, a probe, a trigger left behind by something far older, far more massive, and far more powerful. And this horrifying possibility gains even more weight when researchers examine the energy signature embedded within each spacetime echo, because the signature is not uniform. It fluctuates rhythmically in a progression identical to the oscillations once observed inside 3i Atlas, meaning the entity following the echoes is not just responding to its signal, it shares its architecture, its design, perhaps even its origin. And that origin now appears to be older than our galaxy, older than the large-scale structure our civilization once assumed was the limit of ancient cosmic activity. And the dread deepens further when a new anomaly appears, a faint, repeating electromagnetic whisper embedded inside the distortions, so subtle that only the most sensitive radio telescopes detected it. And when decoded, the whisper is not a message, not a language, not a beacon. It is an answer, a harmonic mirror of the final pulse 3i Atlas transmitted before it vanished. And this answer, this echoing reflection, implies communication between two entities far beyond our comprehension, one that left and one that is now arriving. And if that does not terrify you, consider this. The amplitude of the whispers is increasing, meaning the responding entity is getting closer, its signal strengthening as it approaches the boundaries of our solar system. And for the first time since this event began, the scientists monitoring the situation have begun whispering a phrase no one ever expected to hear in a scientific context. We are not observing a disappearance, we are witnessing an arrival. And the question haunting every agency, every secret meeting, every sleepless analyst is no longer what we missed before 3i Atlas vanished. But what we must now face is something older, larger, and possibly far more dangerous, comes through the path it left behind. And the dread tightening around humanity's collective throat is this. If 3i Atlas was only the messenger, what happens when the one who sent it finally reaches us? And now, as this colossal, unseen presence races along the chain of space-time distortions like a predator following the scent of its prey, the panic rippling through the scientific community has escalated into something far deeper, far more primal. Because the latest analysis from gravitational wave observatories indicates that the echoes are no longer uniform. They are intensifying, sharpening, becoming more coherent with every pulse, as though the incoming entity is stabilizing its passage, refining its transition, adapting itself to the physics of our universe. And this terrifies researchers more than anything that has happened so far, because such adaptation implies intelligence, or worse, a system designed to automatically reshape its structure to match whatever environment it enters. And if that is true, then this approaching presence is not bound by the constraints of any star system, any galaxy, any physical regime. It is something that travels between them, through them, around them, using space-time itself as a medium, not an obstacle. And humanity has never conceived of such a thing outside of theory, outside of mathematical fiction. Yet here it is, moving toward us with ruthless precision, following a path that 3i Atlas laid out like a cosmic breadcrumb trail. And the terror intensifies even further when analysts discover a new, horrifying detail hidden in the data. The trail of distortions is not just a sequence of steps, but a wake, a residual imprint of the entity's presence, and each imprint is stronger than the last, meaning the thing approaching us is accelerating, moving faster with every transition, as though eager, or compelled, to reach the final destination that 3i Atlas designated. And when the computational models are run again with refined parameters, the projected arrival point becomes horrifyingly clear. The entity is not simply coming to the solar system, it is coming to the exact coordinates where 3I Atlas vanished, a point now empty, silent, and utterly unremarkable to the human eye, yet evidently of immense importance to whatever built these ancient machines, and this discovery has triggered full-scale emergency sessions at every major space agency. Because if the arrival point is fixed, if it is precise, if it is deliberate, then the disappearance of 3I Atlas was not a retreat. It was an invitation, a trigger, a signal sent into a realm we cannot perceive, and something heard it, something answered, and something is coming, and the dread reaches unbearable levels when a new anomaly appears in the data stream. A widening gravitational lensing effect near the predicted arrival zone, faint at first, then slowly strengthening, bending light in a way no natural phenomenon could at such small scale, like space itself is beginning to stretch, preparing to open, and the pattern of that lensing matches, with horrifying accuracy, the final geometric collapse of 3I Atlas, suggesting that the same process that removed the megastructure from our universe is now preparing to bring something else into it, and specialists analyzing the lensing have noticed something even more disturbing. The distortion is beginning to pulse in the same recursive harmonic intervals that 3I Atlas emitted in its final seconds, meaning the arrival mechanism is synchronizing with the signal that triggered its activation, and that synchronization is accelerating exactly like the countdown the fragment once emitted, which leaves only one conclusion. We're now watching the opening phase of the arrival protocol, the prelude to something stepping through a threshold billions of years in the making, something older than stars, older than galaxies, older even than the cosmic web itself. If the age of 3I Atlas was any indication, and the terror rising through every agency, every laboratory, every observatory is overwhelming, because nothing in human history has ever suggested that our universe is visited by things like this, guided by machines older than the solar system, following messages carried on impossible interstellar relics, appearing only when the sequence is complete, only when the conditions are right, and only when something watching from the dark decides it is time, and now, with the gravitational distortion widening, with the incoming presence accelerating, with the final harmonic pulses reaching peak intensity, humanity is forced to confront the question no one ever wanted to ask. If 3I Atlas vanished because its role in the ancient sequence was complete, then what role is humanity about to play in the next stage? And what happens when the thing following its signal finally steps into our universe? And now, as the widening gravitational distortion near the outer solar system pulses like the slow, rhythmic beat of some unfathomable cosmic heart, the truth that no government dares whisper aloud is becoming impossible to ignore. Whatever is approaching is immense, intentional, and following an ancient blueprint carved into the fabric of spacetime long before humanity existed. Because the latest data from LIGO, Virgo, and the Chinese quantum gravity array shows that the distortions are no longer isolated blips. They are harmonizing, aligning into precisely the same recursive geometry observed in the final collapse of 3I Atlas, forming a pattern so complex that computational astrophysicists describe it as a dimensional scaffold, a structure woven from gravity itself, preparing a corridor, an opening, a passageway through which something not merely large but fundamentally alien to our universe can pass. And as this scaffold strengthens, telescopes pointed at the region are capturing faint, horrifying shapes in the distortions, outlines not of matter, not of dust or gas, but of curvature, as though the space behind the distortion is folding in ways incompatible with our three-dimensional existence, revealing glimpses of angles that shouldn't exist, shadows cast by dimensions no human has ever witnessed, and the fear gripping every analyst grows exponentially when they overlay this structure with the harmonic pulses still emanating from the void where 3I Atlas vanished, because the pulses match the scaffold perfectly, like a key fitting into a lock, like the final code in a sequence of activation commands stretching across billions of years. And as the harmonics climb toward their peak, the gravitational distortion begins to rotate, slow at first, then faster, spinning like a whirlpool made of warped space-time, tightening, focusing, converging into a point of impossible density. And this rotation is identical, atom for atom, equation for equation, to the pattern 3I Atlas exhibited in its inner mass oscillations before it vanished. Meaning whatever is arriving now is using the exact same mechanism, the exact same transition, the exact same physics, suggesting a shared origin or perhaps a shared purpose. And the terror reaches a fever pitch when magnetic field sensors detect a sudden spike, a surge so enormous that Earth's ionosphere ripples in response. A planetary scale shiver triggered by something still light years away in conventional distance, proving that the incoming entity is not bound by distance at all, that it is dragging its presence across space-time like a tidal wave. And as these disturbances ripple across Earth's magnetic field, radio telescopes begin to receive the first coherent signal since 3I Atlas vanished. a low, resonant, layered pulse composed of billions of nested frequencies, arranged in fractal intervals, each layer reflecting the exact pattern of the countdown humanity failed to interpret. And when the world's leading cryptographers attempt to isolate the top-level harmonic, they discover something so horrifying that every decoding attempt is immediately classified. The new signal is not a message, not a warning, not a transmission. It is a response, meaning the entity emerging through the distortion is acknowledging the final signal 3IO's Atlas broadcast before it disappeared. And this revelation shatters any lingering hope that this event might be benign, because the entity's response contains recursive patterns that mirror not only the collapsed geometry of 3I Atlas, but also the activation pulses emitted by the final fragment, meaning that everything we observed, the arrival of the megastructure, its internal transformations, the release of the fragment, the countdown, and the final disappearance, were not isolated anomalies, but interconnected steps in a single cosmic process, a chain of events choreographed across unimaginable time. And we, humanity, are not the observers we believed ourselves to be. We were the trigger, the variable that completed the sequence, the last condition required for the protocol to advance to its final stage, and now the distortion at the edge of our solar system is beginning to bloom outward, opening like the aperture of a machine older than the Milky Way, its inner surface glowing with a radiance that does not belong to any known spectrum, as if bleeding in wavelengths that shouldn't exist, and the shape forming inside it is growing sharper, clearer, vast beyond comprehension, a silhouette emerging from a dimension humanity has no language to describe. And with every passing second, the truth draws closer, heavier, more inescapable. For Atlas didn't simply vanish, it made way, and whatever is stepping through the rift it left behind is the reason it came here, the reason it waited, the reason it activated. And the question now haunting every scientist, every leader, every soul on this planet is no longer what 3I Atlas was, no longer how it vanished, but something infinitely more terrifying. What is about to enter our universe through the doorway it opened, and what will happen when the being, or the vessel, or the intelligence older than stars finally arrives at the place where its messenger once stood, where its messenger once stood, where its messenger once stood.